November 25th. Okay, I want to get back to this situation we've got going on here. First of all, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. And we'll, first of all, look at this. I guess I'm going to kind of jump into the two conflicts we are mainly focused on. First of all, I guess on the situation between Israel and Hamas, they have achieved a temporary ceasefire for the exchange of hostages versus Israeli prisoners. That is, the prisoners Israel has captured people engaged in various terroristic activities, or at least unfriendly activities on the West Bank, I guess mainly. So, and of course, most of these people are women and children that are being released. So, and that's good. This is supposed to go on for about 4 days. Ultimately, there's supposed to be 50 hostages released, and I guess there'll be 150 from the from Israeli prisons. So, and there's been a lot of discussion about this, but actually Israel's negotiated a pretty good deal on the numbers. I've heard of like vast numbers being released for one dead body before. So, in that sense, I think they've hammered out that. The issue, of course, is do they really want to have a truce right now or not? And that's always one of the issues that we have to face. But on the other hand, and we probably understand clearly that this is mainly an effort by Hamas in order to buy some time to reorganize, to plan some kind of a sneak attack on the Israeli forces there. That's probably what's afoot with all the tunnels, the possibility of planning, some mines in the tunnel and blow up underneath somebody or popping out. And, these things are probably going to be planned. And I would be not too surprised if the way the ceasefire ends is not Israel resuming the war, but actually the Hamas launching some kind of a sneak attack of some sort, which will resume things. But we'll see. That's just my guess based on kind of history of these things. There is a question of the other possibility is after those days, will they try to string it out by reducing the number of hostages released each time? Or, well, I don't know. As I understand it, Israel did agree to also cut back surveillance flights over the Gaza while this is going on, and that portends trouble right there. But at any rate, so that's kind of the way that is, and we'll have to see, how that goes. If you like these videos, please give me a like. You can, of course, ring the bell, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Yeah, and of course, the other topic we want to get into here, of course, is what's going on in Ukraine. The two have sort of become a little connected given the funding issues there, of course, in Congress. Because, of course, at the moment, the Israeli aid, which was approved by the House, is going nowhere in the Senate, partly because the Democrats want to hold it hostage for Ukraine. But another reason, I think, is because we foolishly decided to directly attack one of the Democrats' pet projects, increasing the size of the IRS to go after small businesses and independent contractors and people like that. Because obviously they want to shake them down, and we could get into what that would entail. But at any rate, given that pretty well made that a non-starter, I think, as I pointed out earlier in a previous video. In Ukraine, some interesting things are happening. I mean, Ukraine itself seems to be touting, above all else, this little crossing they've made across the Gettr River. They blew up the dam months ago at the beginning of this offensive in order to get it drained down to where the reservoir drained down to where they could quickly cross. And now the ground is dried, and now they can do that. And they've established a small enclave from some of their Marine units, and they're getting pretty much pounded pretty bad. But they're making a big thing about how they're advancing against Russia, and like this is a big successful offensive. And really, I think it's more of a PR offensive. Not to say that Russia is going to take some casualties here too, but yeah. Well, anyhow, the big advantage, I guess, that the Ukrainians seem to have is the fact that they do have the high ground on their side of the riverbank, and so they can fire down on the Russian positions, which has caused them to fall back shortly, a little raised back. And other than that, Russia's bombing the Ukrainian side with these their equipment. Well, it's similar to the JDAM. I think they're called free air bombs or something like that, but they're basically the Russian equivalent to the JDAM, maybe a little less accurate and a little less sophisticated. But anyhow, that's what's going on. So other developments are kind of interesting. On the Ukrainian side, they have some drones which have been doing a bunch of little mayhem. And their latest idea is to put the smaller uh, point of view drones on a couple of them on top of one of their bigger drones in order to take it further behind lines and then drop them off. And then they'll go off on their own and attack Russian targets. I guess those will be sort of sacrificable while the big drone flies back to base, I guess. And so that's one innovation that they've come up with. The Russia, on the other hand, has done something else kind of interesting. They've now developed a version of their Lancet drone with night vision, which I guess it looks like to me from the pictures that I've seen on the YouTube channels. It's were I think originally from Telegram, but anyway, it looks to me like it's thermal imaging, and so now they can target the boats crossing the river at night, for example. And so that's kind of an innovation the Russians have thrown in. The other thing they've finally deployed, which is kind of interesting, they hadn't done before, is they're deploying actual cluster bombs. And apparently their version they've come up with is a version that's also a free air bomb type version that glides across a significant difference, and then I guess guided with our GLONASS system, which is their kind of not as good as our GPS, let's put it that way, but it's I guess good enough for the purposes, particularly for the cluster bomb. And these are in the I think 500 kilogram range, 1,100 pounds, so they're fairly good sized bombs. A lot of bomblets in that, and they've started using those in the last few days, which is kind of up to this time I hadn't heard any reports of them using that sort of weapon. So I don't know whether they didn't have them in stock, or I can't believe they just held back because of kindness. But at any rate, they are being used now. So we introduced cluster munitions in the form of 155 millimeter artillery shells some time back. And so I guess this is part of the payback that's coming from the Russian side. And given the fact that they have kind of air superiority over the front lines pretty much, they have to kind of be careful, because there's some anti-aircraft capabilities out there. But they pop these things up and they can glide for maybe 30 or 40 miles or something. So that's what they've been doing. So that's kind of a new Russian innovation as well. So other than that, it's pretty much, the basic strategic stalemate, with each side having its little local offensives. I think the Avdiivka offensive that the Russians are doing is still grinding ahead. It's not, moving by leaps and bounds. The trap hasn't been closed yet, but they're grinding away step by step. And down in the Robotina front, that salient down there that they were working on all summer, the Ukrainians are trying to grind out a slightly bigger enclave there, grab a few extra tree lines or something. No big events there either, but it's an ongoing effort, and a lot of drone attacks and so forth going on. It's almost like they're using, in this war, they're using armored vehicles almost like throwaway devices. It sounds to me like you drive up in an APC type vehicle, deploy a squad of infantry, and then the vehicle tries to get back and is usually blown up before it gets back. It's kind of sad, but that's the kind of thing that's going on. Well, a lot of destroyed vehicles, obviously, and so I don't know. There is some discussion here. I think that each side has launched drone attacks in the last couple of days, and each side claims they shot them all down. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what they're claiming. And I don't know. There's so that's kind of the situation. Apparently, the Russians have just got deliveries of new Su-24 and Su-35 aircraft, and those are going to be coming into service to replace maybe some of the losses earlier in the war. And so that's about it. But the big thing is on that is, again, getting back to funding. I mean, the last aid package we gave was only $100 million, which is pretty peanuts for the scale of this conflict. And so right now, the strategic point is, we've also had a couple of elections in Europe, a recent one just in the Netherlands, which seems to be going against supporting the Ukrainians. I mean, you've had pullback from the Poles and like Slovakia, I think it is. So you're starting to see the NATO itself, countries step by step are starting to pull back from the commitment they've had to this thing. Meanwhile, our aid is tied up in a congressional dispute, which may be hard to resolve, given that Republicans are trying to, quote, pay for these things by cutting programs probably the Democrats want. Um, if they get out of that mode, you still have the issue of the Israeli aid and you have the Ukraine aid. Of course, then there's some things for Taiwan and border security. And of course, that to me is, of course, the conservative edge would be that if we could tie whatever they end up coming up with in their aid compromise to some real changes to the border security process, including money to actually finish the wall that was started under Trump. And I would say another thing is changes in the law, which would basically strip Biden of the right to just let these people in the country willy-nilly based on the idea that this is some kind of a amnesty. It's not an amnesty, obviously. It's not asylum, excuse me. It's not asylum. It is an amnesty, but it's definitely not an asylum. And these people could easily get asylum in other countries before they got to the United States, and they're not doing it. So I think we ought to tie the thing up to some changes in the law on that, because remember, normally, just to put an initiative out, it would be met with a Democrat bloc in the Senate normally, or even if we had a small majority in the Senate, a filibuster. But if they want this aid and they're willing to break the filibuster to get it, then we could tie these provisions to it. And that'd be what I would like to see happen. Whether it will happen with this goofed up Republican, very small majority is hard to know. We did win back the seat in Utah that we lost when that guy retired to take care of his wife. So I guess we're pretty much up to the same majority we had in the beginning, although people are trying to throw our little corrupt congressman from New York out. I see no reason to expel him. Just wait for the prosecution. Why prejudge the trial? But on the other hand, given some of the election results in some of the areas around that area, I'm not sure whether we would have a chance now to win that seat back or not with another candidate. So anyway, that's kind of the situation, I think. But certainly Ukraine is in a bit of a problem here because the aid seems to be slowly collapsing, just like their offensive collapsed. On the other hand, the Russians don't seem to me to be on the verge of imposing a galloping victory either. The interesting question is how that could end. Eventually, I suspect some aid will get approved, though, and so it gives Russia a chance in the meantime to score a few points. I think that they're planning on launching a bunch of missile attacks on the infrastructure, the heating, the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, to give them a cold winter. And of course, Ukraine has its own plans. They've particularly been savaging the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think that's where the state of issue is at the moment. My thought is Ukraine ought to get over it and actually agree to negotiation with Russia, because I think it looks to me like the Russians are saying they're open to negotiate, and it's really Ukraine that says we won't negotiate. So I think they ought to at least see what kind of a deal they could come up with. It probably will be a lot worse than what they would have had if they'd have made it over a year and a half ago when they could have. But at any rate, I'll be wrapping this one up for now and be posting it on Rumble as always. And until next time.